Monday comes early. This chapter closes. A new door opens. This is the second shift.
It's just an example of financial independence where you aren't necessarily reliant on the bread and butter, right? You've built the option, and you can leverage it not to increase the bottom line or get Scrooge McDuck levels of wealth, but it allows individuals to kind of assess and pivot. It pays for mistakes, it pays for experiments, it pays for sort of the lessons learned along the way.
In today's episode of The Second Shift, I welcome back my co-host Aaron Millage, and we take some time to review lessons learned from previous conversations with our guests. Today's topic, the true value of financial independence. And spoiler alert, it's not just about retiring early. When money is no longer the driving force, you can ask different questions, better questions. Instead of what pays the most, you ask, what fits my life? The conversation is next. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another great episode of the Second Shift podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Jepson, and I'm joined again today by my intelligent and insightful co-host, Aaron Millage.
Yeah.
Aaron, welcome back. You've been busy.
I have been busy. It's taken me a long time to build this brick wall that you see behind me,
and create the neon, shape the neon.
It's hard to work with neon, as it turns out. So no, we were in the middle of a relocation, so it's good to be back. And excited to kind of go through this, this recap and kind of a dive into common threads, what we've learned, and big takeaways.
Yeah, I think it's, first of all, welcome back. I'm glad to have you. And I think this will be an interesting episode, I think, because, over the first 10 episodes that we've done, I think this is number 11, so double digits. Anyway, we've started to notice some themes or maybe principles that are developing as we interview our guests, and which is interesting because the guests have very different stories, and so I think that's probably telling us something about just what retirement's all about or what transitions are all about.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, especially if you look through kind of the cohort. And granted, our data is it's not as pure as a pure sample, right? Like we're specifically picking people that meet the criteria of the second shift. But within that cohort that should have sort of like, well, everybody has the same story, everybody sort of has the same kind of, influences. There's a lot of diversity. And so I think that's been one of the most interesting things is these themes that continue to show up as undercurrents that are, they all sort of weave together to define or help sort of explain people's second shift or life after a career, but they're not all the same. And they carry different weights, and some are present, some are not, completely depending on the person. But at the end of the day, I think we can boil them down to kind of a common list, right? And I think that's what you've done. Your expert analysis has distilled it down. So, do you want me to run through the list of kind of what we discovered, or anything to add before we kind of reveal the magic list?
No, yeah, go ahead and do that. But before, maybe I'll just say that I think one interesting side project that's emerging from this podcast maybe is that we're not just interviewing people, we're actually creating stories or a database of experiences that we can tap into and learn from. And I think as we build out that with more guests, it'll reveal even more interesting patterns and things that maybe we didn't expect going into it. So but yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I think the first, obviously from our perspective as financial professionals, to us maybe the most salient point is financial independence didn't buy retirement for these folks, right? It buys choices, it buys options, and we see that again and again. And it obviously it bubbles to the surface, not only because we look for it, right, because of our careers, but also, I guess, unprompted, that subtext shows up during the interviews. The second is this notion of what is enough, right? Defining enough, which is the kind of the heart of the behavioral aspect of the financial questions. And so, one, it's a difficult question to answer, and two, it's sort of touchy-feely, and three, it changes, right? Depending on the season and what's going on, and it's incredibly personal. The third is, who am I without blank? And that blank could be medicine. It could be, identity, career. Who am I without the corner office? Who am I without whatever? I think that's our emotional anchor for the podcast, sort of answering the question of, you're leaving something that has defined you through your formative adult years. Now what? What is? Who are you going to be? The fourth is retiring to something, right? Like, what are you retiring to? And it's never, nobody has just been, I'm just going to retire to the hammock.
Yeah.
And we laugh about it because that's, I joke like, oh, I just want to be a man of leisure and float in a pool, right? No, it's funny because that couldn't be further from the truth of, I think, of how we're all wired. And so, not only does that kind of imply the struggle of retiring from something, right? Like the who am I without X? So that creates the struggle to retire from that. The next question is, what are you retiring to? And the folks that we see that are thriving had that clearly defined. And it may not have been before, right? They may not have figured that out until they made that leap or that shift. But they all had that common thread of, like, we have retired to something, or we have transitioned to something.
Yeah.
And then the final one is kind of the courage to experiment. Nobody had the perfect plan. Period. Everybody dabbled, everybody experimented, everybody had lessons learned. I think one of the things that continues to come up is that even among the failures or sort of the experiments, everybody learned from it, right? Everybody gleaned some bit of information, either about themselves, about their family, about like what's important to them, and then applied it to the next iteration. And so there's this iterative loop of this feedback of, well, that didn't work, or like, no, this is not for me, but let's keep trying.
Yeah, I think that last part is really interesting because none of it is linear. Certainly my career has not been linear, and your career has not been linear, and none of the guests' careers have been linear. And even before if they called it retirement, which few of them did, but even those that did say, okay, now I'm retired and I'm doing this, getting to that point wasn't linear for them either. Yeah. And so I think that that's a important point to make for those who are on the other side, like the front side of it before they've gone through it, is that you don't have to know exactly what you're doing. You don't have to know exactly what your life is going to turn out as, but, gain the experience and learn from that experience and be willing to, follow the direction that your life is leading you. And it may turn out completely different, but much better than you expected it would be.
Yeah, no, it begs the question of, we have sort of introduced this survivorship bias into our guests, right? Like the folks that have done the experimenting, they've developed these imperfect plans, they've learned from them, and then they've just kind of figured it out, built the airplane as they were flying it, as it were. And so now, the question in my mind is how many folks out there listening to this, or maybe have even heard of this, have reached a point where they have experimented and it didn't go the way that they wanted to, and so they stopped, and they didn't sort of tie the ends together of like, well, that didn't really work out, like, ugh, that didn't look so good, but okay, well, I learned something, and therefore how can I apply it to kind of the next phase? I think that's sort of an interesting question, and I don't know how we would find a guest that would sort of be willing of like, yeah, I'm still a corporate executive, I'm still a physician, I'm still a whatever, because I tried something and it didn't work, and but I don't know how to learn from it. That to me would be an interesting sort of interview.
Yeah, I assume that there's probably lots of people
yeah.
that are listening to this podcast that are in that situation, or they feel like they are. And, and because again, I think it takes, there's a lot of anxiety with leaving something comfortable.
Yeah.
And if you've been doing something for 35 years, like it or not, it's at least comfortable.
Yeah.
And to kind of branch out of that because you're unhappy or just because you want a new adventure, takes some courage and some effort, and sometimes it's easier to stay where you are. So, I think that it would be interesting to hear that perspective, from people who are living that real time.
Yeah. So here, this is just our impromptu call to action for those listening. If you fall in that category, get in touch with us. Because
reach out.
We'd love to chat. Yeah.
So let's pull it back to the first one because and kind of dive deeper into that one, because a lot of those themes actually are centered around optionality, right? And what I think is interesting is, how popular the FIRE movement has become. Financial independence, retire early.
Yeah.
Our last guest, Logan Foltz, was in a situation where he reached financial independence early in his career, and was unhappy as a physician. So he was motivated to retire early, and so in many of the people in the FIRE movement, that's retiring early is kind of the goal, right? So you're sacrificing, you're doing all these things, you're saving as much as you can, all with the goal of retiring early, because then life is going to be great.
Right. Yeah.
But then how many people reach that point and suddenly realize that retirement in and of itself didn't really fulfill them at all? And in Logan, our last guest's case, he kind of wandered for a little bit, not very long, and just said that, this is not what I expected or wanted, and went back and became a tax advisor. And so, I think and that's one issue that I have maybe with the FIRE movement. It's financial independence, absolutely, but early retirement may not be the right move for everybody. But I think what financial independence leads to is options. So you're not buying retirement, you're buying options, optionality to actually do what you want with your retirement or with your money or whatever you want, however you want to phrase it. It gives you choices, and that's way, way more powerful.
And I think that so gosh, we could the FIRE movement is one of my favorite straw men to beat up upon. I will refrain, but there are a couple of sort of interesting, I guess, tidbits to take from it. The first is obviously I think that it's at some level it's counterintuitive to or I guess counterproductive even to the type of people that it is most readily accessible. Meaning that folks who do have the option to reach financial independence and retire early are typically these type A, highly motivated, highly successful, identity driven, high work ethic people. And so now you kind of you're embracing this financial ideology that runs current or counter to your the threads that make you up. Meaning that, okay, well, you were never meant to kind of live this man of leisure lifestyle. Otherwise you wouldn't be in this position to kind of accomplish financial independence or early retirement. And you could tie it back to, I fully admit I like the Puritans. They have a very high view of the virtue of work, not just like the Western view of the Protestant work ethic, but just like the innate just drive to labor for the good of the individual, the good of the community, and it's a high virtuous calling. And so, I think that there are these elements of there's a individual element, there's a spiritual element, all that drives us to work. And so the FIRE movement is just a kind of a counterpunch to, I think something that's very internalized to, again, folks who are really in the position to achieve fire. And it's just weird to me because I've run into my share of fire adherent, like just, they're on fire for fire. And they reach the same point of, well, here I am, I can retire, but it's sort of empty and vapid, and just it doesn't solve anything. Like there's still some sort of hunger for activity or value driven output that it just doesn't, early retirement just doesn't scratch.
Yeah, and that's what I thought it was interesting how Logan talked about it, because he was, I don't know exactly, but I think he was early 40s when he reached financial independence and decided to step away from medical practice, and realized, because your vision looking forward to that is, okay, it's all going to be just fun times. I'm going to hang out with my buddies, and we're going to go skiing during the day, and we're going to go on all kind of vacations and stuff. And when he got there, he realized that, number one, all of his buddies were still working.
Yep.
Number two, it was the weather was terrible, and he couldn't go and do what he expected to do. And then whenever he went out to meet people and kind of told them, okay, well, they asked what you do, and he goes, he realized that there's stigma associated with a 40-year-old man not working.
Yeah.
And, so it was interesting to hear his perspective, because I think he was the only one of our group that actually truly became financially independent, retired early.
Yep.
Everybody else moved in that direction and created optionality as they went through. And I think that's probably more of the standard course. But interesting perspective to hear from him about that.
Yeah. And it's, I think the other thing with fire is, and you touched on it, like you save and you have this sort of like uber frugal lifestyle to get to early retirement. And so you sort of retrain, your own sort of enjoyment and during the years of abundance, you're tightening the belt. And so people kind of, those are learned behaviors of like, well, no, I got to, like, it's rice and beans and ramen. And you get to retirement, and it's very hard for people to kind of dump those behaviors and be like, oh, now I have my bank account is full, and now I can enjoy what I was all the while saving up for, but I can't really enjoy it because I've trained myself over the past decades to live this austere lifestyle. And so I think that, we've probably beat up on fire enough, but I think that it's probably, suffice to say that options are great, building those options. But I think there sort of needs to be an awareness of there are second and third order effects of building those options too aggressively, right? Like changing behaviors that take a while to unwind or never change once you never enjoy it once you reach sort of the financial independence stage. And then executing an option, calling that option, as it were, early, without truly understanding, everything you said. Like, things that people don't think about, like the stigma associated with just like being a guy that loafs around and looking for a buddy to go ski with during the middle of the week. Those are things that you don't really think about as you aggressively pursue financial independence or financial optionality.
Yeah. So do you think that people sometimes are confusing freedom with leisure?
Oh yeah, for sure. And so, because I think that when you think about it goes back to why, like, how do you create financial? Why are you in a position to have to work towards financial independence? Well, it's because I have to work. Like, I have to work to pay the bills and whatever. And so therefore, if I've reached financial independence, I'm free of the tyranny of work. And now I can be an international man of leisure full time. Yeah. And so I think there's sort of a kind of dissonance there between freedom, leisure, and the pursuit of both.
Yeah, I think that, if you just look at our guests, like I say, none of them really stopped working. And we've had guests anywhere that were still fairly young to those that are more well seasoned, but they've all become something, financial planners, like entrepreneurs, teachers, writers, consultants, volunteers, mentors. They've all taken what they've learned in their career and modulated or molded somehow into something different that still brings them purpose. But what financial independence allowed them is it allowed them to do that. It allowed them the freedom to make those decisions that may not be the most financially lucrative decision. I mean, if you want to just make money, just keep working as many shifts as you can as a physician.
Yeah.
That's how you make the most money that you can. But that, as most of us who've been in those shoes have known or have realized that's not sustainable, at least not if you want to be a healthy, happy, normal human being that other people like to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something I think that I've seen from the client, the practice side of things, the pursuit of, call it wealth, just sort of a broad brush, the pursuit of wealth as an in and of itself, right? There's no purpose behind it. It's just, I feel like I need to stay on the hedonic treadmill, accumulate wealth, and, then what? I don't know. Like, that's all I know. That's all I know is just, I need to make money, but for what purpose? And I think that's a difficult thought experiment for a lot of people, because they, back to your point about freedom and leisure, they assume that, okay, well, I accumulate the Western ideal, especially, United States, the American ideal is like, well, I accumulate wealth, I work, and then I hit retirement, and now I join, the over 60 community center, and I play pickleball all day. Okay, maybe, but that's I think we've proven that two things in that. The first is there's a good chance, especially in these high impact type A professions, like, you're going to reach burnout before you reach that point. And two, there's a high probability that shifting from this career that has had immense impact, both professionally, personally, at the community, at, whatever level you pick. That's a very big, you're not just downshifting one gear, that's multiple gears once you hit the pickleball court, right? And I think that's a difficult mental exercise for people to go through. It's just, we're not programmed to do that, to think through, okay, I don't know that I can, you just assume like, right, I'm going to quit and do leisure activities all day. It's usually not that easy, not that clean. And nobody talks about that.
Yeah, no. And I think what you're right also in saying that, our audience is a different group of people, probably, just by the kind of how we set up the podcast and who we talk to. It really is high impact professionals that are driven. It is hard to shut that down, even when you can. But let me ask you this, and maybe I can share it with my own story. But how do you think that being financially independent affects the way that you work if you don't leave your profession?
So I think that it cuts a couple ways, right? And so you can see that for having the option, right? And assuming you're asking like, hey, you have reached financial independence, you built the option, you don't need to work,
right?
And so I think it one way that it cuts is it forces the kind of the thought experiment of why am I doing this? Because, I assume that everybody who got into some high impact career at the very get-go was like, I'm going to make a difference. Like, I'm going to be the best at this and change lives or change the world. And along the way, life happens, you get jaded and you realize like, well, at least I'm making good money. And so now you're at a point where you have to honestly assess sort of the internal motivations of why you're doing this. And if it is, hey, well, I still think I can make an impact, then I think it allows people to say, okay, what if how can I alter how I engage employment to kind of get back to the beginning, right? Because before that, you've optimized for utility and wealth creation. But if you don't need to do that, then maybe you can look at like, okay, well, maybe I can go back to volunteering. I'm still gainfully employed, but maybe I have a little opportunity to, mentor the young folks, or spend a little more time on things that don't necessarily impact my own bottom line, but provide personal, it's aligned with values and personal beliefs. So I think that's the best outcome, is that you reach a point where you're like, I'm going to start giving back. Like, I'm going to get back to the beginning and making a difference. I guess the flip side, the other way that it cuts, is that you just don't care. Like, it's just indifference and apathy. And you're like, don't care. I'm going to min run this and give the absolute bare minimum of what I need to do, because I don't know otherwise, what I would be doing.
I think, that's an interesting dichotomy, but I think for the most part, at least maybe on the physician side of things, is that it's probably the former rather than the latter.
Yeah.
And I think what I think financial independence gives you power, right? It gives you power to create your ideal, or at least as close to your ideal career day as possible. And because it gives you the power to say no, right? Because you can walk away.
Yes.
And so you can say, okay, these are the parts of my career that I really value and I really like and are impactful to me. I'm going to maximize those. And here's all the other stuff that bothers me. I hate doing it. And often you can negotiate those out or pay someone else to do it for you. And so that you really can optimize your career that way, if money is not the driver of all decisions.
Yeah. The other thing, and I'll speak to broad terms. I don't want to divulge anything that's inside ball. But there is a nonprofit that we are familiar with that has sort of lost its way. Right, has shifted away from its founding mission, its core vision, all the things that it's been doing for decades. Huge nonprofit. It's kind of alienated some donors, and along the way, this nonprofit was, for years, was very deliberate in creating, as nonprofits should be, kind of these diversified revenue streams in case of when the wallets weren't open as much as they were with donors. And so this nonprofit has a very, very large and diversified real estate portfolio that it's sort of keeping the lights on and the doors open as it tries to kind of navigate back to core principles. And I think there's a lesson in that, not only at the, how to govern a nonprofit, but also at the personal level. It's just an example of sort of institutional financial independence, where, you aren't necessarily reliant on the bread and butter, right? You've built the option, and you can leverage it not to, kind of, again, increase the bottom line, or, get Scrooge McDuck levels of wealth, but it allows individuals to kind of assess and pivot. It pays for mistakes, it pays for experiments, it pays for sort of the lessons learned along the way. And so I think that's another element of financial independence that people don't realize, is that it can be a lifeboat. If necessary, like you can use it as a lifeboat. You can deplete those financial resources in a season of like, oof, that was not a good idea. Like, we need to kind of get back to the basics.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it helps. I think another way to say it is it helps you make better decisions.
Yeah. Because
your decisions are no longer about what pays the most. You ask, what fits my life the best?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's powerful. I mean, that's very few people have that opportunity, actually, to be able to kind of craft out your life in a way that actually fits your life.
Yeah.
And money is a tool to allow you to do that. It's not, but again, we've mentioned it several times. If you consider the money or the independence or the financial independence the goal, or retirement the goal, you get there and you realize, it hasn't changed anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
in the age of labor transformation in like the AI disruption age and all of the things that you read. Some of it is, sort of sensational headlines and like to scare us all that the robots are taking over. But I mean, there's a reality where, large language models and agentic applications of models will replace some element of work for a lot of previously, white collar skilled folks, professionals. And so again, financial independence allows you to navigate these sort of sea change paradigm shifts of what's going on in sort of the labor dynamics or technology advancement, or this isn't some sort of Luddite revolution, but it does kind of give you the ability to kind of say, okay, everything's gonna be okay. We take a deep breath, and then, like you said, figure out what is actually aligned to your values, your current season of life, your family, all those things. And you don't have to be reactive. You don't have to be reactive to the fact that the robot just took your job.
Yeah. So if optionality is the goal, then, and we've kind of hinted at this a little bit before, but why do so many people, including physicians and other high impact professionals, wait until they're 65 to find it?
Gosh, yeah.
Why? And even those who financially can do it, why don't they?
Yeah. I think that, these are things you don't learn about. I mean, like you went back to school to be a financial professional. Like you are fresh and current out of the ivory tower of academia. Was this ever discussed?
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so
and it certainly is never discussed in medical school.
No, because the assumption is that, I think, from sort of a demographic or like this I don't know if it's this sentiment or nostalgia of like, well, you're going to work for somewhere and you're going to put in 40 years with the same company. Like that's the, you graduate or you come out with a trade or whatever. And that's what you do. You're going to be that person for 40 something years, and then you're going to retire, because that's what America was founded on. Like that's what George Washington would have wanted.
Well, and definitely in medical school, it's like that. It's not like you would ever get in if you go to your interview and say, yeah, I think I'm going to try it for about 10 years and then do something else.
Yeah. It's not, it runs counter to everything that sort of any institution has taught us. And so I think that's something like we don't really think about it. And there's something like uniquely virtuous in like, well, I'm going to grind it out and I'm going to dedicate, like I'm going to give my pound of flesh to this profession. But at the same time, nobody ever talks about, burnout. Again, I think it's sort of like it's a weakness. Like, why aren't you giving up? Well, no, like I just recognize that my time, talent, and treasure can be used elsewhere for greater impact. So I think that's a big part of it is just there's just institutionally, we don't, like, these are things we don't talk about. And the second is, I think it's easy to kind of get, caught in the inertia of, I show up, I, put my hours in, I contribute to the 401k, I watch it grow. I don't really think about it because, again, everything that's all of the clever little calculators on my 401k site, they're all referencing retirement. Like there's nothing about like, hey, see how your 401k can be used to start a business if you did, there's these things, again, just aren't part and parcel of kind of the normal financial institutions. And so I think people it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. You get into sort of the daily rhythm of life. You get married, you have kids, complexity to life, and you just, like, no one thinks about such things.
Yeah. I mean, I think on the physician side, there's a very strong drive, especially maybe in the older generations. Some of my younger colleagues, physician colleagues, I don't feel it as pervasively, but it's, you are a doctor, and that is a calling, not a job.
Yeah.
And you will sacrifice everything because you've chosen to take on that calling. And I think that's hard, emotionally and behaviorally to talk yourself out of, because it does feel like you're failing the calling, right? And that it's no longer, you no longer put it in the proper perspective in your life. It takes a much oversized perspective of many other jobs or careers that would be easier to walk away from. And so I think it is difficult. And but at the same time, I don't think creating career optionality means you have to stop being a physician or stop making an impact in some other way. I think, but that takes a little bit of creativity and a little bit of just a mindset shift that it's no longer about in the trenches seeing patients with your stethoscope. It's maybe you're helping other physicians to do that, or taking care of patients or medicine in some other way, which there are plenty of, but it's hard to walk away from that sometimes.
Yeah, no, and it ties back to the discussion of identity, right? Like, who are you when you leave? And I think there's an element of just, rightfully so, the pride in saying like, oh, what do you do? I'm a physician, or like, oh, I'm a corporate executive for this a company you've heard of, and it's definitely in your 401k in the top part of the S&P 500. Yeah, I work for those guys, and to step away from that and then lead with, oh, what do you do, or who are you? Like, well, I had formed this small mentor community for youth leadership. Oh, okay, cool. Does that scratch the same itch? Is that kind of and these are questions I think that I don't know. Those are sort of deep identity based questions that people wrestle with, or they avoid altogether.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this, that, as much as we love kind of pontificating on the esoteric of financial optionality, I think that the concrete, sort of the practical is the fact, and you mentioned like, why don't people kind of do this either earlier or at all? And I think, again, financial planning doesn't address this, and it doesn't address sort of looking at financial resources through the lens of building those options and then executing those options. So again, from I think both of our backgrounds, both from the combat aviation side, both from emergency medicine, you kind of say, okay, well, this is the trade space, right? Like, these are the courses of action. And so if we go down this road with this course of action, these are the downstream effects. If we go down this one, these are the downstream effects. I don't think that financial planning at large does that. I don't think it certainly wasn't taught in any of the academic lessons that I've had, courses, whatever. Like, scenario modeling is not necessarily, it doesn't have the aperture necessary to kind of capture these large life movements and transitions. Like, that's not the focus.
Yeah.
And so,
and a lot of people don't even go beyond the financial plan snapshot of when that's, they say, okay, well, I need a financial plan.
Yeah.
So somebody gives them a financial plan, but don't realize that that's based on today's assumptions and today's goals. And a year from now, that may be completely different because life changed for you.
Yeah. And nobody asked the question of like, why are you doing what you're doing? Like, what's your, the kind of the deeper questions that we ask to kind of tease out that, oh, well, tell me about this burnout that you're feeling, or tell me about this, passion you have for, community involvement or whatever. I think very few planners speak to that, and very few plans actually provide the scaffolding to look at that and say, okay, well, if I execute this, what happens? Well, what about if I do that? What happens?
Yeah.
So the plan is, I think that, almost like a second shift plan is we're rewriting or rethinking the way that financial plans need to be designed. And I think that's sort of like the critical element of like okay, cool. Bryan and Aaron, like, good talk. Like, how, like, what do I do? I think the first step is kind of rethinking the purpose and execution the financial plan as it's being built relative to kind of creating those financial options.
Absolutely. And I think that takes some effort. That takes some effort both on the planner side of things, but also on the planee side of things. The person which means you have to have conversations. We talked about that. We have on our website the 5 conversations of everything that you should talk to your significant other about before you make a big transition. But when I try and do scenario planning with people like that, and the majority of my clients are physicians, and many of those physicians are saying, okay, well, what I kind of want to retire early, but I don't really know what I want to do after that. And so we go through scenarios and say, okay, well, what would it look like if you retire at age 55 or go part-time at age 55 or something like that, and move it in different directions, which I think gives people the permission and the courage to actually plan for that and make it happen. So honestly, I think good financial planning and in creating financial independence, my experience is that it often prolongs careers rather than shortens them, because you're now planning your life as opposed to reacting to burnout without a plan in place necessarily. And I think just having a plan and realizing, okay, I've created some options for myself. Now I can choose what I want to do, makes you happier to continue working in some way that's productive.
Yeah. No, and for us, for the planner, you're absolutely right. Like there's a lot of, like, on the planee side, like there are some tough questions. There's some tough homework. There's some tough conversations, both internally and with spouse. And then for the planner side, like, I think these are the kind of the conversations, the plans that are most interesting to us, right? Because it opens up kind of the toolkit of, okay, well, the mandate is building optionality. We have high income right now, but we have these personal values and these other sort of internal and external influences that are driving the need for some sort of change, or the reason for the options. So then we look at, it is satisfying to be a practitioner to allow us to look into, okay, well, like, let's look into everything from real estate to, how are we cost setting the depreciation? Can we, like, do you have any business ownership? Do you have any sort of entrepreneurial inclination? Can we look at that? What would that, so it allows us to get creative as planners. And I think it's sort of a mutually beneficial exercise to help clients build financial independence and optionality.
Yeah. And also I think it gives, it helps us to have a conversation where we can really have people sit down and say, okay, what are my values? Now I have the resources. How do I intend to spend them? And whether that's by creating some other job, or maybe it's how am I going to spend this in a way that's creating the most impact?
Yeah.
Whether it's to family, whether it's to charity, so it's not just spending your money, spending your time and the other, skills that you have to really give back to others. And when people get to that point, man, planning is fun, right?
Yeah.
And life becomes way more interesting and fun, because now you can start making choices that really align with your values and can impact the world, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. No, I think that the exercise in learning how to transmute kind of financial assets into personal values or the expressions of those values is incredibly satisfying for all people involved.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Aaron, it's been a cool discussion. I think it's interesting to, just step back and not necessarily interview a guest every time, but to just learn from the guests that we've already had. And we've had some fantastic guests on already. They've taught lots of great lessons, and it's been fun. I really do enjoy getting to know people by deeper conversations, because even if you meet somebody at a conference or something like that, how often do you sit down with them and just say, tell me about your life for an hour and really get to know them. It's been pretty fun.
No, it's been a great avenue to, like you said, to get to know people, and also kind of augment our own research to understand, truly what is the second shift? Like how do you navigate transitions? How do you build these options? How do we define enough? Who are you without your impactful career-based identity? So it's been good for I think both of us,
Yeah, for sure.
and hopefully for the folks listening as well.
All right. Anything else to say as we wrap it up?
No, I'll just be here doing stand-up comedy in front of my brick wall with my neon sign.
I keep waiting for a good dad joke. At least.
I know. It's Monday, and so I got nothing. This is
you're all spent out over the weekend of
that's right. This is me at my
comedy.
best. Yeah, no, this is all serious, all business now.
All right, sounds good. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on the Second Shift Podcast. We hope you found the discussion meaningful and relatable, and hopefully it's given you plenty to think about. If you did, please share it with your friends. You can also download a copy of our Second Shift Blueprint on our website, secondshiftpodcast.com. That's number 2, ND, shiftpodcast.com. These are the 5 conversations you should have with your significant other before any meaningful life transition. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next time.
The work you did mattered, and you're not done. Welcome to what's next.
Thank you for listening to The Second Shift. If this conversation landed with you, please download our free guide called The Second Shift Blueprint. 5 questions you and your partner should discuss before any major transition. Get it at secondshiftpodcast.com. That's number 2, NDshiftpodcast.com. And if you're approaching a transition and want to talk through the financial strategy, we offer a complimentary 30-minute Second Shift audit. Details are at secondshiftpodcast.com/audit. Join us next week for another great episode. And remember, your life and identity doesn't end with retirement. It's just entering its second shift. The content shared in this podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered personal financial advice. You should always consult with a financial professional to determine what is appropriate for your individual circumstances.